Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream. I hope that everyone had a great weekend. It was not such a great weekend, needless to say, in northwestern Syria, where Islamic jihadists who now control the government in Damascus went on a rampage beginning on Thursday, March 6th, and they spent the last few days rampaging through the northwestern coast of Syria, the Mediterranean coast, targeting religious minorities there, the Alawite minority, and yes, Christians. We saw footage today, I obviously cannot show here on YouTube, of a Christian crucified, literally crucified by these Islamic jihadists. And as he's hanging from I don't know if it was a cross, he was crucified to something. As he's hanging there, this poor guy, he's shot in the back of the head. And his brains are literally blown all over the place. It's too disturbing to even describe. But this is happening right now, folks, in real time before our very eyes. That old radical Islamist slogan, I guess you could call it, first the Saturday people, the Jews, then the Sunday people, the Christians, is playing out right now in real time. It's happening in Syria. And it's not the first time it's happened, by the way. Christian persecution right now is at levels higher than we've seen probably since the early church in the time of Jesus, or the time during the Acts of the Apostles and afterwards under the Roman Empire. That's how bad it is now globally. Now, I'm here in the West, I'm here in the United States, and across the West, there's not the physical persecution yet. There has certainly been other forms of cancellation and persecution and harassment, but in places like Syria, which is home, by the way, to an ancient Christian community, one of the oldest, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon. Then you take a place like North Korea, like China, of course. Believers there are laying down their lives. Iran, laying down their lives, imprisoned, tortured, murdered. So what's happening in Syria right now? Well, we warned about this about 3 months ago, almost to the day. December 6th, 7th, 8th, 2024, right before the calendar flipped, just before Christmas, these Islamic jihadists, Hayat Tahrir al-Shams, let's call them HTS for short, that's what they're commonly known as, a group of Al-Qaeda linked, they're an offshoot of Al-Qaeda, ISIS linked, radical Islamic jihadis, killers, roared out of northwestern Syria, out of Idlib province, with backing from Turkey, Recep Erdogan, no surprise there, Muslim Brotherhood through and through. And they went on a lightning offensive throughout Syria, seizing Syria's, at Israel's doorstep, more on that in a second, but seizing Syria's largest cities, including the capital, Damascus, the crown jewel. So you got rid of one evil in Bashar al-Assad. He was toppled, in case you had to guess, and he fled to Moscow, where he now lives in exile. In the process, his patrons, his big bosses, the Iranian regime and Hezbollah, were kicked out of Syria. Great. You hear that on the surface. You say, great. Unfortunately, the replacement is not any better. It's two sides of the same coin. You have the Sunni jihadis now in power, and they essentially supplanted the Shia jihadis, Iran and Hezbollah. They were the real force behind the Assad regime, helping to prop it up, along with Russia. Now Assad's gone, Iran, Hezbollah evicted, essentially. Russia still has bases along that Mediterranean coast where, by the way, people who are being hounded and hunted by these jihadis have fled for refuge to the one Russian base in particular that's still on the Mediterranean coast. But we warned about this in December. The leader, and we're going to get into all the details, the specifics of what's been happening over the weekend, but just a quick reminder here, the leader of HTS, and now the de facto leader of Syria, Mohammed al-Golani. This guy's Al-Qaeda to the core, a terrorist who was wanted in the United States, millions of dollars bounty on his head. I believe it was $10 million bounty on his head. Then all of a sudden he becomes the leader of Syria, or at least large chunks of Syria. There are still regions, including the Kurdish region, of course, in the northeast, that are more autonomous, that don't answer to Damascus. But nonetheless, Muhammad al-Golani becomes leader. He and his jihadi forces roar out of Idlib province and they conquer half the country, including the main population and power centers, Aleppo, Damascus, Homs, Hama, the biggest cities in Syria. And all of a sudden, everyone's saying, wow, jihadis. We went from Assad, evil, Iran, Hezbollah, to Sunni jihadis. This is very bad. What are they going to do? Well, here's what they did, very clever from the outset. They seize power, then they consolidate power, again, with Turkish backing. Muhammad al-Golani begins to wear a suit and tie. He may have even combed his hair. And he says, my name is no longer Muhammad al-Golani. I want to be known as Ahmed al-Shara. I'm a statesman now. I've moderated. I'm a diplomat. So we've seen him, Muhammad al-Golani. I'll still call him his original jihadi name, Muhammad al-Golani. Let's do that, because that's the real al-Golani. He starts a little tour of different capitals in the Arab world and even meeting with European diplomats. And they're all very eager to embrace him. They're very eager to swallow the lie and buy the whole charade that this jihadi, hardcore jihadi, has moderated and changed his spots. Well, folks, I've covered this for a long, long time. And I've met jihadis and I've actually interviewed them. And I can tell you it's very, very, very rare that a jihadi leopard will change its spots. And Muhammad al-Golani is no different. So reality now strikes. He laid low for much of the last 3 months since taking power and kind of consolidated his power. And then all of a sudden he unleashes the wolves of jihad these past few days. Essentially what happened, the Alawites, you might say, who are they? Well, the Alawites are a small sect of Shia Islam. Bashar al-Assad, the former leader of Syria, was an Alawite, a very small sect that nonetheless ruled Syria for the past 50 plus years. Hafez al-Assad, Bashar's father, and then Bashar. And this sect, the Alawites, are based mainly along the Mediterranean coast. That's their main power base in Syria. Well, apparently some forces loyal to Assad, Alawite forces, began fighting with these Sunni jihadis who now control Syria. And the Sunni jihadis took that as a pretext to go on an all-out rampage and massacre. And again, they revealed their true face. They sweep through villages and towns in northwestern Syria these past few days, dragging families out of their homes and killing families, wholesale slaughter, not only Alawites, but Christians. I mentioned the crucifixion scenes that have been posted on social media. Alawites, Christians, other variety of Shia Muslims, the Druze, also in the crosshairs. The Druze obviously have a large population in northern Israel as well, near the Syria border. But we've seen open statements of these jihadis marching through the streets of northwestern Syria saying, we're coming for the Christians and we're going to kill them. We also have videos of Christians in Syria who have masks on because they don't want to reveal their identity, saying, please help us. It's a genocide. It is a genocide. They know exactly what they're doing. This is happening again over the past few days. And Muhammad al-Golani, the moderate, who European diplomats just love to roll out the red carpet for, they're hoping beyond hope that he really means what he says, that he really is moderate. Well, they're going to be sorely disappointed. But Golani now is reportedly telling his minions, hey, don't share video of the carnage. Don't share any video of what you're doing. It makes us look bad. When that gets out there, our moderate veneer is dented and the world sees our true face, murderers and terrorists. So be careful about what you put out there on social media. Too late, because his hordes gleefully maimed and murdered for the past 4 days. And just like on October 7th, birds of a feather, same deal. Hamas jihadis and these jihadis in Syria. Just like on October 7th, they couldn't wait to show off for the world. This is what we've done. They're proud of it, folks. Blood on their hands, innocent blood, civilian blood, men, women, children, for no reason at all, targeted, murdered. Christians, Alawites, Druze, and they're proud of it. They're proud of their debauchery, their evil, evil acts. It's a different breed. If you're sitting in comfort in the West, in particular, anywhere you are in the world, but in the West, the Western mind these days can't quite wrap its head around the level of evil that we're seeing in the Middle East right now. But that's why you're here. And that's why one reason you're joining us to be educated about this, to be enlightened. To me, it shouldn't take much educating when you see what happened on October 7th. Demonic orcs, hordes of literally demon-possessed murderers foaming at the mouth, storm into southern Israel and butcher little babies. I shouldn't have to do much convincing. I shouldn't even have, in a normal, sane world, I wouldn't have to state Israel's case when it comes to October 7th. I wouldn't have to explain this to you. A bunch of terrorists invaded Israel without provocation and slaughtered a bunch of women and children in their beds and dragged Holocaust survivors, 85 years old, into tunnels beneath Gaza, into the bowels of hell. In a normal, sane world, I wouldn't have to explain who was wrong and who was right in that situation. But welcome to 2025. In a normal, sane world, I also would not have to explain the state of play in Syria. Much like on October 7th, jihadis on a rampage slaughtering innocent people. But that's why you're here, because you want moral clarity. So if you like what you're hearing, current news, current events, breaking news, from an unapologetically biblical perspective, bold, biblical, current for such a time as this, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. We'd love to have you here with us every day as watchmen and women on the wall, because a lot's going on. And it's really a vexing thing for me that in the wake of October 7th in particular, I think about this a lot. And if you think about this a lot too, let me know. We've got a very active chat here. It was the darkest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. 1,200 Jews slaughtered in cold blood, the hostages as well. And the world, you think Israel and the Jewish people would garner sympathy after that. Instead, the worst massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust actually increased levels of anti-Semitism. How does that work? The opposite happened from what you'd expect. You'd expect, man, finally the world will say enough is enough. Anti-Semitism is a toxic poison. Anti-Israel hatred, it's the world's oldest hatred. It's inexplicable because it's demonic. It's driven by the devil himself. He hates God's people. He hates God's land. He hates what God loves and what God has anointed, what God has formed an eternal covenant with. Whom God has formed an eternal covenant with. So in one sense, it's not surprising. They all crawled out from under their rocks on October 7th. On the other hand, it shows you the level of spiritual warfare. Folks, is going to intensify. What we saw take place in Syria over the past few days is an extension of what ISIS did just a few years ago. Until President Trump, God bless him, kept his word. He smashed that ISIS caliphate during his first term. And he's already taken a strong stand against jihadists during his second term. 7 weeks ago, he was inaugurated. Just 7 weeks ago today, I was there in D.C. for it. But we have a very big problem on our hands in Syria. Now, the carnage for the moment seems to have abated, seems to have stopped for the moment, key term there. But the aftershocks of this, every religious minority, including every Christian in Syria, is now on notice. Again, the mask has slipped. This is who they are. Mohammed al-Golani, HTS, the new regime in Damascus, this is who they are. And it's going to get nasty there, I believe. Nastier, I should say. Can it get any worse than it's been since March 2011? 14 years ago this month, when that Syrian civil war broke out? Perhaps it can. And if you know Bible prophecy, you might say, Stakelbeck, indeed it can. Think of the book of Isaiah, chapter 17, verse 1, which says that Damascus, one of the world's oldest inhabited cities, think about that. Even the Mongols, for all their carnage and chaos, didn't completely raze Damascus to the ground. And yet, Isaiah 17 says a day is coming where Damascus will become a ruinous heap. It will cease to be a city. It's not me saying it. It's the Bible. And again, Damascus has never ceased to be a city. Even during the worst moments of the Syrian civil war over the past 14 years, Damascus was a functioning city. It was much of it rubble, but still Bashar al-Assad was there for a good chunk of the time. Damascus International Airport was also operating, and operating most of the time in a nefarious way in terms of Iranian arms shipments coming through that airport, transiting through the airport into the hands of Hezbollah over in Lebanon next door. But bottom line is Damascus did not cease to be a city, even among all the carnage of that civil war. But the Bible is very clear that a day is coming where Damascus will be a ruinous heap. It will cease to be a city. What do you think of that? We've discussed that a bunch here on the show as well. When we dig into prophecy, which is one of my favorite topics, and I believe we're living in Bible prophetic times right now. But when we dig into the prophetic, people want to know about Isaiah 17. Every time something big happens in Syria, there is laser focused attention on that country. And again, the prophetic implications of what's unfolding there. I think in terms of what to watch, a few things. Turkey. What about Turkey? And that becomes paramount because in the next breath, I'm going to ask, what about Israel? Obviously, Syria at Israel's northern border. Obviously, Israel has created a buffer zone around Mount Hermon, right on the Israel-Syria border. Israeli troops are in Syria right now. They're north of the border. They're in Syria. They've created a buffer zone between Israel and the jihadis. A very wise preemptive action. They've done the same in Gaza, by the way, and in Lebanon. The lessons of October 7th have been internalized and acted upon. Israel's new strategy is to create buffer zones inside these neighboring countries to create plenty of space between Israel and Israeli towns and the jihadi wolves on the other side of the borders. So they've done that in Syria, number one. Number two, the world should be thanking Israel right now. And by the way, how about this? The world howls about supposed Israeli war crimes and genocide in Gaza, which is a flat out lie. And we've dissected and unpacked that many times here in the live stream. But where is the world? Where is Europe? Where is the mainstream media when it comes to the genocide in Syria these past few days? Crickets are chirping, radio silence, because it wasn't Israel. But here's the thing. The world should be thanking Israel for what it did in Syria back in December, and a little bit more also in January, February, March. In December in particular, as Assad was collapsing, as the jihadis were moving into Damascus, Israel went on massive bombing campaigns, massive airstrikes throughout Syria, destroying Bashar al-Assad, or what was left of his military arsenal. Ships, fighter jets, chemical weapons stockpiles, all destroyed. Military bases destroyed by Israeli fighter jets. Why? So that the jihadis couldn't get their hands on advanced weaponry. Could you imagine if Mohammed al-Golani and his hordes had advanced weaponry right now? Many thousands more people would have been killed. And by the way, the final tally reportedly is over 1,000 that were killed over the past 4 days. Some are saying that number is much higher. It was an absolute rampage. It was a slaughter that these jihadis inflicted upon northwestern Syria. But could you imagine if they had fighter jets, tanks, chemical weapons, ships? They would have if Israel hadn't acted. God bless Israel. What a wise preventive action. That, along with the buffer zone, Israel's not messing around. Again, October 7th, no more. The lessons were internalized by the Israel Defense Forces, the Israeli government, and the people of Israel. That said, we now have different ethnic groups in Syria who are being targeted by the jihadis asking for Israel's help. The Alawites, who I mentioned earlier. Ironically enough, look, the Alawites, that was Bashar al-Assad's peeps. That was his clan, a bitter enemy of Israel. Now they're desperate. They have their backs against the wall or their backs against the sea, the Mediterranean Sea, and they're calling for Israeli help and support. The Christian community, I'm sure, in Syria would love Israeli help as well. And Israel, over the years, has done this in Syria throughout this civil war. Israel had something called Operation Good Neighbor in Syria. I covered it. The IDF, under the cover of night, would sneak into Syria to help people who were being persecuted, religious minorities, to help them escape Syria, escape the madness, and receive treatment, medical treatment in Israel. Israel did the same in Lebanon in previous years. We could go on. But the Alawites are calling for Israeli help. The Christians would not turn it away either, obviously. And the Druze, D-R-U-Z-E, another large religious minority in the region. You have Druze in Lebanon, Syria, Israel. The Druze have been in the crosshairs of these jihadis as well over the past week or so. Even before the big massacre started, the Druze were being threatened, and Israel, in return, threatened this jihadi government and said, don't you dare. So, folks, do not be surprised if Israel has to intervene in this situation in Syria. Not for any kind of land gain or anything like that, but simply to protect religious minorities there. The Alawites, the Druze, Christians, and prevent a genocide, a massacre. We're watching this very closely. And that brings us full circle back to Turkey. If Israel goes toe-to-toe with these jihadis, and it may very well do so, what does Turkey do? Turkey has a lot invested in Syria now. They help these jihadis take power, and Erdogan wants to have his claws in Syria at Israel's doorstep. So Israel substituted one great foe in Syria when Iran, Hezbollah were kicked out, and Assad, and now another is there in the form of these jihadis and Erdogan of Turkey, who is a bitter adversary of Israel. It hasn't gotten physical yet, unless you count 2010, the Mavi Marmara incident, where Turkish-backed jihadists clashed with the IDF on a ship off the Mediterranean coast. But listen, Turkey's a NATO member nation. Although under Erdogan's radical rule, I call Turkey NINO, NATO in name only. Nonetheless, it's a NATO member nation with the second largest military in NATO. It's a formidable foe. And it's coming into conflict with Israel, in the very least in the diplomatic realm and through proxy. And the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39, you may know it well. It's called the War of Gog and Magog. Funny name, I know. But it speaks of a future war where nearly every prophecy scholar I've seen believes, yeah, Turkey's going to be in there as part of this latter days confederation that comes against Israel on the mountains of Israel. And Turkey's a stone's throw away right now in Syria. So you do the math. But the prophetic chess pieces certainly are moving on the board, and Syria seems to be one of the biggest chess pieces. So we're watching what's unfolding there very, very closely, folks. Keep the beleaguered Christians of Syria in your prayers. Everyone in Syria who's being targeted, but your brothers and sisters in Christ, if you're a follower of Jesus like me, you're always thinking of the persecutions through the roof, not only in Syria, but around the world for followers of Jesus. So keep it all in prayer. Prayer works, and they're literally crying out for our prayers right now. More to come, I'm sure, in the next few days. We'll see where this goes, if Israel has to intervene as this thing escalates. But that jihadi government in Damascus right now, we warned you about them back in December, and this is not a shock at all. This is who they are. If the 20th century, the century of Mao, Saddam, Hitler, Stalin, Castro, if the 20th century taught us anything, it's that when someone tells you they want to kill you, you should believe them and take them at their word. So that's a word of caution right now about this new jihadi government in Syria. We know who they are. They've shown us in the past. They have not changed their spots. And now let's see how this all unfolds. Keep it all in prayer. Thanks for joining us here on the live stream. Until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.